that destructive power. So, the beauty of the violence and the power of gods, which is one of the things that I'm really looking to do, is to terrify us that we have way too much power and we've forgotten about how deadly we've become and how important it is to up our wisdom in order to manage this. Now, somebody else was talking as well, and I didn't have the moderating skill to figure out who that was. Who was just
Hey, this
speaking?
is Ayori. Hey,
Hey,
Eric, I
Ayora.
just wanted to make a comment on what you were saying
Sure.
about, young kids. I actually hosted a summer camp in East Oakland, California, with young inner city kids, like myself, who grew up, and we hosted this whole life design experience, and we were teaching them about futurism and creating visions, and one of the logos for one of my products is actually a tesseract. I don't know if you see it in my bio, but yeah,
Yeah.
exposing the kids to those shapes and literally showing them how everything like music, for example, creates a vibration. Vibrations have shape, and showing them the different forms. And they just loved it. I mean, these are kids who, some of them would, traditionally be thought of, okay, they're not doing well in math or they're not doing well in different areas of school. But it's really about engaging them and getting them excited about things and helping them to see the impact of these ideas around them. They loved it. And I just want people to invest in this. We did a program called the Tech Playground one summer in Oakland. And again, connecting music, science, STEM, coding, and it's always been a hit.
Well, that sounds
Eric,
sounds
can you
ama-
say, oh, sorry. Can you
Sorry,
say again what the sensory water tube represents mathematically?
it
I have one in my
represents.
house.
Okay, it represents a U1 principal bundle over the circle. In other words, the
Thank you.
symmetry that keeps rotating is called U1, which is another name for the circle. But what you don't know is that everything electromagnetic, like the photons you're using to look at your screen, are based on a hidden circle that is sitting over every point in space and time, which was a relatively recent discovery. And I think what I want to do is I just want to start getting people to be aware of how much wonder there is that for some reason never gets discussed. And by the way, I'm at 1%, so this is going to crap me out of the room. I'm going to demote myself. And I just want to say what an honor and privilege it is to have so many people here for the most completely ridiculous named room on Clubhouse. Nobody's afraid of the mathematics. Thank you guys very much. This has been incredibly fulfilling. Come find me. My DMs are usually open. I don't always respond, but I will try if you persist.
Yeah, thank
Thanks,
you.
Eric. I have a question for the room. So I feel like the topic of this room, we're talking about fairly advanced mathematical concepts, and I'll be careful. Like, I'm not trying to draw a false dichotomy in what I'm saying next, but are we more interested in spreading like basic math literacy that is applicable to people's lives? Like I'd be very excited to have people understand how our progressive income tax bracket table works, and be able to split the check and to be able to apply math in very simple ways. And I think we start talking about really advanced mathematics and things that don't really have applicability. Like I don't have to solve math proofs very often or do something very equivalent to that. So I was curious to hear what people thought about. Is it more important to have applicable math or to have a wonder of the beauty of math? And um, do they live in different worlds in a sense?
Why are they mutually exclusive to you?
I
Like,
think
why do we have to
Yeah.
choose?
I mean, I was specifically saying I don't mean to draw a false dichotomy. I'm just saying that for most people, they aren't doing very advanced mathematics. And I think sometimes people see that and they wonder, how is this applicable to their life? But then when it comes to the applicability of basic mathematics, they also miss that.
I think part of it is you need to think of some of these concepts as a flag, as the Mars of the mathematics field in a way, as something that has beauty in it, that draws aspiration to it, that gets you interested, hooked, and more likely to learn the basics. So each field to draw people will need an inspiration flag, a star, so that you can at least aspire for something to reach the moon.
If you think about art, we study sort of great masters and or in architecture or any field really, the people who are doing sort of the most cutting edge work and the most inspiring work, to what I think it was Diana who just spoke. These are the things that sort of actually are why you do, like the applicable things move you towards that. And I think actually for mathematics, everyone, it's at least in the United States, it's very, people proudly will state, I hate math, and they'll tell you the last math class and how they struggled, and it's like a bonding moment. And it feels very absurd because most people haven't actually ever been exposed to sort of a lot of this beauty or sort of the wonder or the puzzlement. And it can give math sort of a different context and give it purpose for why you're doing some of what people perceive as sort of these small steps.
I'd
I
like to
want to add, I
piggyback
think
on.
that the idea of convenience actually disincentivizes people from learning math and being exposed to the joy of math. Like, when you come from a community where you are encouraged to build or create or make in any way, shape, or form. For me, it was learning how to sew clothing because I wanted to look good, and so I learned how to sew clothing, and I had to learn different concepts in math in order to do that well. And that also led me eventually to building games and doing game development because I loved making games. But I wouldn't have learned all of those math concepts were it not for something that I was applying it to. So I think those things are connected. Understanding and making math a means to desired ends, and eliminating some of the convenience that that limit our need to be exposed to these concepts.
Hey, Arroyo,
Yeah.
can I piggyback off your gaming comment really quick?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So hearing Eric talk about wanting to make more people interact with math, I've kind of been delving deeper into the study of like alternative reality games and kind of how viral phenomenon goes on the internet. And something that's popped up super recently is these weird pillars that keep popping up around the earth. I think one just popped up in Romania. One was in Utah a couple weeks ago. It was kind of blowing up all over people's Twitter feeds. And I was just thinking, if you want to make something super accessible to the masses, what is not the best way to get to that other than like just playing a simple game? And I think mathematics, especially from someone with a not super strong math background who then had to force himself to learn it in college, I think gaming is a really great way to get into it, and also can teach so many concepts that at the end of the day, I wouldn't have been exposed to without it. So I just wanted to piggyback off that and say that that was a great comment.
Yeah, and Trevor, actually, I'd like to piggyback on what you were saying, because when Eric was speaking, two things. One, especially if you're talking about inner city kids, gamification is a great way to get some very advanced concepts through in a way that just kind of slips into the subconscious. Another thing too is when I think of advanced mathematics, right? Advanced mathematics is basically the attempt to explain very simple things, right? So I kind of look at it like a Rube Goldberg machine, where you've got like all of these different processes, a bowling ball falling and hitting a duck, and the duck does something else. All of this just to make like a pot of coffee, right? So it's kind of looking behind what's causing the pot of coffee to be made. So that's kind of how I see advanced mathematics, and going forth with that.
Just to piggyback off what Julian was saying, I have a 10-year-old daughter, and she automatically writ off math because she hates it, and then she didn't really become great at it until once again there was some sort of a gamification. So doing things or not allowing her to get to do fun thing or things that she deemed fun until she was able to answer simple math questions, which now is just like just seeing her answer things so fast and quick because we gamified it, or we put an obstacle in her way in order for her to get to what she wanted to do for the day is something that is I believe everybody should do. Like, and so if you're having problems with math, gamification I believe is the number one way to learning it. Because math, let's just say, just staring at a bunch of numbers is not fun for everybody. It becomes intimidating, and it becomes quite boring to some people after some time.
Well, I would like to say, first of all, it is so great to see all the Klein bottles. That is very cool, and it's nice to see that around the space. But as someone who was kind of late to math, and I think to the point of a number of people, gamification takes math out of the, number solving and math solving into the problem solving, and I think that most people who are confronted with a problem that they can solve that's interesting to them or that applies to them, whether that be through entertainment or, practicality, something in their everyday lives, they're usually encouraged to say, hey, if there's a very precise way I can figure this out and make my life easier, let me invest in doing that, because that might be a good way that I can either increase my productivity or just like do something new. So, me coming through, public school, doing things on my own, I came to learn about math when someone was like, I was asking about, well, what is higher level math like? They're like, we're not even using numbers anymore. It's all logic. And that completely blew my mind. And I started reading like set theory by Thomas Jeck. And that stuff just kind of blew my mind because it was nothing that anyone had given me access to, in grade school, which was just like number math and stuff that wasn't really fun at the time.
I really wish that they would rename, the math that we learn in, K through 12 school, and just use the term, arithmetic, because I think that that's why math is getting a bad rap. Because when we're learning in a space where there is this pressure put upon you to answer something in a moment, or answer something very quickly, and not everyone learns or processes information in the same way. I mean, you'll meet some genius, brilliant people, and you ask them a very simple mathematical question, and they might pause, right? Pause for a while because they're answering that question in such a deep way and with understanding, something that somebody could easily just root like memorization, recite the answer. So there needs to be like a difference between how we create and incentivize and support a learning environment around these kind of concepts. And also, literally, we need to change the terms that we use when we refer to these things to disrupt the negative branding associated with math.
I agree. I'm actually kind of curious. Like when you're talking about these terms, like when we speak about arithmetic, we're not talking about a lot of the subjects people learn in I guess high school, where you'd be learning geometry, algebra, trigonometry, calculus, and statistics. I think we do a good job of differentiating the branches. It's just not everyone knows what those words mean, and we kind of use them loosely, kind of how people use English very loosely in general.
And
Well,
more importantly,
I think
the uses.
the branding, the negative perception of math starts before high school. And so when those different terms start to come into play, yeah, I mean, I love geometry. I would have told you when I was younger that I love geometry because I'm a very spatial oriented person. I'm also an artist. I was badass at it. I was also badass at like everything that was like logic, like word questions and things like that. But I would have told you when I was young that I hated math. I would have told you that up until I was like 20 something. Until I finally like realized I don't hate math. I hated my early teachers of math.
Hey, one
That's
thing
so
for me
interesting.
to like
I
truly
feel like what you guys are really touching on with this with this conversation. I'm really enjoying listening to you guys talk, because I'm in the same boat as well, where school wasn't my favorite subject in school. And I really think that what that highlights is that our educational system is failing to really show the wonder of math. And so my food for thought question for all of you guys is that if you could restructure math in a certain way that we could teach children early on, not only the beauty of math, but its purposes, what interesting methods or
Great one,
techniques
right? So
or
I would truly harp
things that you would
on
include?
practical application, right? So, me being the AE, the aerospace guy, right? So understanding, getting in a cockpit and handling a yoke and feeling the forces, on that airfoil was pivotal for me to understand aerodynamics and truly get a passion for aerospace. So I think that the practical application of what we learn is pivotal for getting people latched in, right? So what Elon is doing with SpaceX, I think, is amazing, right? I think to get my daughter interested in orbital mechanics, watching the chart, right? I think those type things, are very helpful for me and useful tools to get the kids in the next generation excited about mathematics, right? The practical application.
I mean, but also some things that are fun for mathematicians, the general populace doesn't know anything about. So even the concept of moving a problem into a higher dimension, that would have blown my mind as a fifth grader, and I probably would have pursued math had someone showed me something cool instead of just like, your typical arithmetic, because those are things that I'm then consumed with mentally, like, well, what other problems could I move into other dimensions, and how things just become different when you think about them differently. But then math also has a space to work through those things. I think that math education could really benefit from some creativity and not such linear thinking. Like, quite literally, they could move math education into a different dimension to make it more interesting.
Sorry,
So
what do you mean by moving problems into a different dimension? I don't follow.
I was just about to say
earlier
the
in the
same
I
thing.
think I think what he's trying to say is that hypergeometry distribution representing daily life issues or experiences create that connection immediately when you're trying to represent, like they were explaining earlier, how you're tuning your guitar and you have all these different knobs, and then you can control different dimensions on how you're projecting the sound of the guitar. If that's what connects you with mathematics, music, or any other type of expression, that's what you need to connect people with math according to their preference and likings, I think.
Thank you for
And
articulating that.
love it, love it. Yeah,
Awesome.
From
the
I
two things I
studied.
like to say
Or sorry.
is build a boat and learn to play a song. Like those two things will transform your mind about math.
As
One
someone who's
one idea I've
And
had for other than like a practical introduction to how to use certain mathematical subjects, I thought it'd be really interesting if we taught math in the same sense it was discovered. Like when you go into calculus classes, they teach you the formulas and where it's applicable to like use and calculate rate of change. Or yeah. So what I thought would be interesting if we looked at, calculus more as like the proofs that led to it, what Isaac Newton used, is it analytical geometry or whatever, to prove it. And some calculus courses do that, but the focus is obviously, I mean, depending on the root of the course, I guess there was like an engineering focused course. It's just like, where is this formula applicable? And I think it does a disservice to people because, like, I don't know. I guess there's pros and cons to teaching just the formulas and how to use them, but I would hope, or the educational approach I think that would make people understand math better would be to teach the process that led to understanding these things.
Yes,
Adam, you bring up a really good point. So
I
as
think
someone who
that
studied math, And people, and Chip brought this up earlier, where it's like, well, are you just doing really complicated numbers, like adding or calculus? And actually, I try to tell people that math is much more about just a way of thinking and approaching problems. And part of its beauty is that it's quite rigorous in how it thinks about defining problems, defining spaces, and exploring those problems. And so, partially why you get all these really beautiful shapes that you're seeing, or beautiful concepts that are difficult to grasp, but they sort of stretch your brain, is because it's almost it's a way of viewing problems in the world that can, and practicing abstracting them and moving them into different domains. And so, in terms of education, there was an earlier question, I think it might have been Angel or Luis, who asked, what would you change in sort of younger education math? And I think most kids, if you gave them puzzles, if you gave them things around space, if you gave them problem solving and taught them other ways of looking at problems and taught them other ways to explore the situation, that's all mathematical thinking, and it's all sort of a playground of mathematical thinking and playing in the slightly more abstracted version and coming back down to the application. So I think when Ayori talked about how the things that are called math in school are very arithmetic, even through high school, calculus for many people, it's like peak math, but it is a very arithmetic thing because it's just one way to apply mathematical thinking. So that's where I would sort of, it's very playful actually in the sort of higher level maths, but it's actually every kid can be doing mathematics in a very playful manner and developing that way of approaching problems in the world.
Beautifully said. And I just want to give the floor, Eric. Thank you so much for being patient, man. It seems that you have something to share with us as well. Bethania, that was really awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it's just that, like she said, about as far as the playful manner, I completely understand that. And like I said, it goes back to gamification and just making things fun. And also practical application. Like a lot of people don't understand what math is for. Like we have the typical 1 + 1 is 2 and going to the supermarket and things of that nature, but they don't understand how it's applied to other things. Like I really didn't get into math until I was grown and I was doing things like building a business with my partner Siegfried, Ziggy. He's in the room, by the way, and and actually building a business and actually playing dice. My first way of having fun being an inner city kid was actually rolling dice and learning about probability. It changed the whole game for me. It's like, oh, I have an advantage on other people because I know about probability when rolling 2 to 3 dice. And so it started making it fun for me. And I taught my friends and we started having a competition and discussing probability. And that was kind of my first introduction into math. And then working with my partner Ziggy, as far as we had to build a business on Snapchat, and we used to do filters and things of that nature. And then he started bringing more of the mathematical equations and trying to figure out CPMs and all these other things, and that kind of made it fun for me too. So it's the practical application and actually making it fun, and that I believe kids and grown-ups need.
I just want to add to Eric's point of practical application and how we kind of started this conversation. I personally feel like learning taxes is something that should be mandatory. And although all these other things should be introduced, it's going to be hard to convince the generations to be interested in math when they graduate and find out they have to pay taxes by themselves. So I feel like that's a practical example.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and also another one, to if we're all sharing just like fun ways to recontextualize what math could be in our lives. Something that is really coming up recently is something called the Unreal Engine, and basically that is the you can basically create own universe inside of these video game simulations, and the only reason we can really do that is because we understand the mathematics and physics of our current world, like
Exactly.
gravity and like these other laws, that we can implement them in virtual and computerized worlds in order to create essentially an infinite amount of virtual spaces because of math. And so yeah, that's just another use as well, that these kids could really dream big and really take us, because really, like, at the end of the day, you know, every generation is going to discover new and interesting methods to use this information. And so I'm just really excited for what comes next.
So I wanted to go back to what, I don't know who it was that said, placing a problem into the fourth dimension. So what I found when I first kind of like started reaching into like higher consciousness is that I'd place like complicated life problems into that dimension, like with my mind, and I would really get the answer. Like within the next like 2 hours, the answer would just basically flash across my head. I wanted to know, has anyone ever done that with mathematics? So have you, if you know how to like basically kind of like use your subconscious mind to solve something, or how to tap into your subconscious mind to solve something, has anyone done that with mathematics? So not use their logical mind, but kind of try to use their creative mind or their subconscious mind to solve a problem.
I think and I'll just give a quick answer and let some of the mathematicians on the stage sort of answer that. But I think sometimes, at least in my case, that comes about literally where I'm trying to solve a pretty difficult problem, but it comes to me at night. It comes to me when I'm sleeping, or it pops up,
Yeah.
when I'm not thinking, I'm thinking about something totally different, and then it pops up. So I think the subconscious mind is always working and constantly I mean, obviously it is, otherwise we wouldn't be able to breathe. But it's constantly working. And once you put something there and set that thing in motion, that it's continuously working to try to solve that issue.
Yeah, I totally agree. I really do think that this power should kind of be taught in schools as well, like reaching into basically just a different type of consciousness, because problems can really, really be solved. So now coming into this conversation, I'm really thinking about the problems that were kind of difficult for me when I was doing mathematics in uni, and knowing what I know now, I'm just thinking I could have probably used my subconscious mind, like how I purposely go into that kind of like field now when I'm just trying to solve like a kind of like difficult life problem. So I was just wondering, like, if anyone had really, really done well. You did say like it just comes to you at the brink of sleep, or like that's how most answers come anyway. Like when I get into that field. So yeah, it's quite interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to add, I think that there are things and activities that we can do that can also help with our brain in processing things, from the, left and right hemisphere, specifically certain types of martial arts, certain types of qigong, certain types of tai chi, physical movements that actually strengthen the synaptic connections in the middle of the brain that allow more movement across from the left and right side of the brain. And I think that also helps you to physically enact more of the things that are logical and math oriented. I like to say that the math that we see is art, right, in form, and it is an example of the theoretical logic from the math in our minds.
Yes, yes, I completely agree.
I have a two-part question that I'd like to direct at Chip, Batanya, and Jared. So, Jared, you were speaking earlier regarding how practical application is something that you see as the primary driver for getting kids to engage. Would you also say that, like, the intuition behind math, and in the example you used with your daughter and flying, when she experiences, lift and drag flying, is that is that the practical application as much as it is the intuition? And the reason I ask that question is around how you apply it to something like a Klein bottle, where you can't see or experience a practical application, but you may be able to intuit how it functions or how it works. And then the second that I'm far from a mathematician. And so to Eric's point at the beginning of the room, how could I be a missionary or someone who spreads higher math concepts while I don't have a full understanding of them? And is it just around spreading, the wonder of the unknown?
Hey, Chris, I think that's a great one, man. So lift drag, right? Well, while you can't see it, I think it's something that you can feel, and I think that feeling element, right? Those forces acting on your body. You couple that with a theoretical understanding of aerodynamics, and I think that's where you get to your practical piece. I think I heard an example earlier of gambling, right? You're out shooting dice and it gives you, a driver to really understand probability. Um, I think that's where I was going with my comment earlier. I think, giving these kids something that they can see and feel and touch and really understand, right? So for my daughter in flying, she can, uh, you know,
You muted yourself.
thank you. Yeah, aerodynamics. You can stall a plane out, right? And these things can be tragic decisions that can come out of, not having a good grasp. So yeah, that's what I would offer back to you.
Chip, would you have anything to add either on the first part or the second part?
Sure. I'm naturally a creative person. I'm an artist essentially by trade. But to what Jared brought up about aerodynamics, had someone showed me the four forces it takes to get a plane off of the ground, and then gamified that concept where I had to alter what the forces were in order to get my plane off the ground, I would have been really into that at any age, right? But those things really weren't presented to me in that way. And so I think that math as an art, most people won't really get to, or as a creative endeavor, or even as entertaining, most people are not going to get to until they can really see what it can do. It's almost like if we're in a chemistry class, but you don't know that we're really creating paints. It's like, show me the painting, show me the paint, and then I'll get into how we get there, and then the math will be the answer, or the experience or the process by which we get there. And I think that would be very meaningful.
I think the funny thing that everyone has kind of brought up here is that it's not until we really figure out things that we're highly interested in or really motivated by, and then we tend to learn the mathematics behind that particular discipline, whether it's flying a plane or painting or um, I know Eric had a good one also, but whatever it is that once we finally get there, we really look into the mathematics behind those things and how to become better, at those things. And I think that's also the nature of math, where sort of in school, it's a little bit of an exhaustive approach where we're learning as much math as we can, but not specific math for something that you might be interested in. So just an observation.
I mean, I totally agree with that. It hasn't been until my adulthood that I've even found out that math could be applied to things other than very sort of intuitive endeavors. And now it's become so interesting to me because I can essentially find math that works through the vast majority of, we'll call them regular problems, but also creative problems. And then there are sort of exploratory spaces that happen just within math that are super exciting as well.
So I want to bring a little controversy to the room. I just want to ask, has any of you guys used, or women, have used math for dating? And how has it helped you? I think this would just be fun to bring into the room since we're just talking about math and fourth dimension and using math in practical application.
I definitely think if I mean, we've all heard it's a numbers game, right? So I think many people use it to their advantage if they're not stuck on one particular person. Men and women may take their shot at several people because the math is there that at some point it's a numbers game. So the more that you put out there, you'll land somebody.
What was the
So for the
equation they
past decade,
used in The Beautiful Mind when he was going to when he used the approach? I forgot what mathematical equation he used. That's what made me just think of that. That just came to my mind when thinking of asking this question. That's why I'm sorry about interrupting.
oh yeah, no, I love that film. For the past decade, I dated pretty heavily, and I used something that I created called project-based dating. And I swear this was one of the greatest things I ever did in my whole freaking life. Because half of the people that, I would encounter and, have a first date with and talk to them about this concept of project-based dating, which is essentially, okay, you find something that you want to do that would help you to grow personally, and you do that, you do that project that's a part of your dating experience with this person. Half the people were just like, hell no, I'm never doing anything like that with you. You're crazy. And then the other half are literally have become some of the greatest friends and people in my life, and just really lifelong connections. And I really thought of that as a mathematical problem because, how do you get people to show their true selves to you when they're often trying to impress you to get more time with you? Well, you have to give them an example of what that experience or time would be like, that would force them to kind of eliminate themselves. And I think it's especially a challenge as a woman, because most people don't want to eliminate themselves from dating a woman. But yeah, so thanks everyone for joining us. This has been an incredible experience. If did anyone else want to carry the room on and moderate, Alex or Eric?
I'm fine. It's 3:14 here on the East Coast. I'm definitely about to go to bed. This was I couldn't even fall asleep because this was so interesting. But I thank you for having me, and I'm gonna follow you guys, Alex, and how you say your name? I don't want to pronounce it
Iori.
wrong. All right,
Iori.
Iori. Okay,
Yeah.
because the public school system failed me as a young man, so English isn't my strong suit.
I don't believe you. But yeah, it's been great meeting you, and thanks everyone for tuning in and listening. Keep the math alive, I say. Yes. Take care.